Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My guest, professor of history in Memphis University, Tennessee, Andrei Znamenski,
Mhm.
and also a associate scholar in Mises Institute in Alabama. I would like also for everyone to mention that Andrei Znamenski has a wonderful YouTube channel, Magus West. And today we are going to have a very interesting conversation. I want to make a little introduction. The comprehension of the role played by the Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate in the system of Russian security services comes slow and not to everyone. For example, in Ukraine, happened a vote in the Ukrainian Rada and some in the Ukrainian parliament, and some people think that this is a kind of prohibition to a religious organization, but it is something quite different. Ukraine took a significant step in the direction of recognition of this terroristic organization under cover of Russian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate. And I have to admit that it is a very time consuming way. It will last for some years, maybe even decades, some in some places, until that really is completed. Yet we need this educational in a way program for the Western people, for the Western audience to realize how much threat is posed from the Russian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate, not only towards Ukraine, but to the whole Western civilization. You know the Western audience very well. You have thousands of students, and you know where are those mistakes done, why it is so um, effectively used by Putin and Kremlin, despite the communications, despite internet, despite the fact that everything is actually quite clear, why cannot people really get the comprehension of the threat? This is what I want to discuss today, and please take your time.
All right, Maria, thank you for this introduction. And let me specify again what we are going to talk about. So Maria mentioned the law that was voted in Ukrainian Rada, Ukrainian parliament. And the formal name of this law goes as follows: about the defense of the constitutional system in the field of religious organizations activities, such a long bureaucratic name. But what does it talk about, this new law that was adopted by the majority of votes? More than 200 votes were given to this law. And only a small minority of parliamentarians, Ukrainian parliamentarians, voted against it, like 20 people something. So the dominant majority approved this. So we are talking about the activities of the Russian Orthodox Church of so-called Moscow Patriarchate. Okay. In other words, Russian Orthodox Church that was and still is active in Ukraine, which is formally affiliated with Moscow Patriarchate. Okay. So why is it such a big deal? Why is it so important for us? Okay. So we're going to discuss this law in the light of history of the Russian Orthodox Church in order to understand why Ukrainians adopted this law and how their enemies of Ukraine tried to fight against this vote. Okay. First, why is it so important? In order to understand for us, I would like to clarify the religious situation in Ukraine. Since I teach religious studies in my university, I teach an introductory course. It's called Introduction into World Religions. So among other religions, I discuss Eastern Orthodox Church, Catholic Church, Protestant churches. So to some extent, I would say knowledgeable about the religious life in the East, in the West. So let me give you some statistics. The majority of people in Ukraine, they're Greek Orthodox or Russian Orthodox, because before Ukraine became an independent country in 1991, all Ukrainians who affiliated themselves with Orthodox Church, they were considered the members of the Russian Orthodox Church. And so-called Moscow Patriarchate. I will remind our English-speaking listeners that patriarchate, it means affiliation. Okay, it means subordination. So Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow affiliation. Okay, so all Ukrainian Orthodox people, they were dominated by Moscow. What I'm trying to say that before 1991, all Ukrainian Orthodox people were forced to be affiliated with Moscow Patriarchate. Okay, the major church that was allowed to officially function was Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. Okay, but there was a second popular church which occupied semi-underground position. It was Greek Catholic Church or Uniate Church. Okay, so Uniates, they occupied a very specific position between Catholic Church and Orthodox Church. They were sitting on two chairs, so to speak. It was like a middle ground, so between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. So officially, Greek Catholic Church, they were subjected to the control of the Roman Pope. But at the same time, in terms of rituals, ceremonies, they were and still are very much like Orthodox. And Soviet authorities, totalitarian authorities, they hated it. So they always persecuted the second most popular church of Ukraine, so Greek Catholic. And they tried to force these Ukrainians who were mostly lived in Western Ukraine, who were members of this Greek Catholic Church. They tried to force them to switch their loyalty to a Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. And some opportunistically did this for professional reasons because they didn't want to be persecuted. So before Ukrainian independence, we had these two popular churches. What Maria described to us, the situation that happened after Ukraine gained the independence. How did the situation change after Ukraine became an independent country? So gradually, after gaining independence in Ukraine, we have three major popular churches. One of them became Orthodox Church of Ukraine, so-called national, local church. They decided to cut its ties with Moscow Patriarchate, okay, which eventually gained its independence in 2019. And
the point is,
mhm,
Andrei, excuse me, the point
mhm.
is that when Vladimir in Kievan Rus baptized Kievan Rus into Orthodox Christianity, at that moment in Kiev was the center of religion.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely.
But then it was practically stolen by the Muscovite popes. Now in 2019, Ukrainian church has another Thomas, which
Yes.
is given by Constantinopolis. But the question is, why historically, and this is a very great question, why can't Ukraine gain again
Yes,
the right
correct.
that it had at the beginning when the Kievan Rus was baptized? Why do we have to figure out all these movements which happened historically via these 1,000 years? Why doesn't Kiev has the right that always was given to Kiev from the beginning on?
Yeah, and we have to talk about politics, of course. The major reason why it happened, these questions you ask, is because of the politics. Because historically, Muscovite state sucked all the years, so to speak. They shifted patriarchy to Moscow, and what happened historically, Muscovite state subjected the Orthodox Church to its own control. It's very important for us to remember, Maria, and that's what people in the West they don't understand. That is why sometimes when people in the West, they hear, oh, Ukrainians, yesterday they adopted this law against Muscovite Russian Orthodox Church. It's kind of attack against freedom of religion. No, we have to understand how does this church function, Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. It functions simply not the way in the West churches work. In historically, Russian Orthodox Church was subjected to the control of the state. It was considered like a department, a branch of the state. It started in Middle Ages, and it was legalized by Peter the Great, who
Yes.
introduced so-called Department of Religious Affairs, which he called Synod, the Great Synod. It's the department of the state. So it means patriarch that was to report to Peter the Great or to the Russian Tsar. He had to serve the state. So that's how historically we have this peculiar situation, which, by the way, reminds me Islam, because in Islam, we do not have either the separation of church and state. Same thing. In the same way, this Muscovite religion, Russian Orthodox Church, it's also tightly tied
Bonded.
to the state. They sleep in the same bed, like we say. They sleep in the same bed. Russian Orthodox Church, Muscovite, and Putin's regime. And it didn't happen yesterday. It didn't happen the day before yesterday. It happened historically, I'm trying to say. So that's the problem. That's what Westerners need to know. Because for any knowledgeable person who lives in Eastern Europe, especially in Ukraine and Russia, they are fully aware of this situation. And that is why there is no way to say that Ukrainian parliament yesterday violated freedom of religion. Why? Because they simply adopted the law against the department of the Muscovite state, which is called Russian Orthodox Church. Since Russian Orthodox Church was considered part of the state ideology, state religion, I repeat, it developed throughout the centuries, this situation. Because of the situation, naturally, Russian Orthodox Church served the interest of the state. There was no separation. Like, let's say in the United States, churches are very independent. In each church community in the United States frequently elect their own ministers. Yeah,
Secularity.
yeah.
No
Separation of,
secularity.
yeah.
But also something very interesting to mention, through ages, yes, it happened just as you said. But besides, there was a moment when Russian Orthodox Church, even in that strange variation of Christianity, was prohibited in the beginning of Soviet regime. It went under restriction,
Persecution.
I would say. And then in 1943, after there was already, so to say, almost no church in Soviet Union, especially in Moscow, because they were all atheists.
Atheists.
And there was no church at all. Lenin said that it is opium to the masses, to the
Exactly.
people. So it was all prohibited. It didn't exist for a while. And then in 1943, Stalin decided to establish a new, so to say, or renewed, but practically completely done by himself, a new Russian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate. And he did it just after he had to stop Comintern, an organization that was meant to spread these ideas of Bolsheviks into the Western world. So he basically established something that was meant to be a spy organization towards his own people and towards the West.
Absolutely. Maria, what is important right now, you are switching the conversation to another important question. So we kind of figured out what kind of church it is, a Russian Orthodox Church. So it's a very different from regular Western churches. That's what we need to remember. The second thing Maria just paid our attention to is the history of a Russian Orthodox Church in the Soviet Union, which is another mythology, because right now Putin's regime cultivates this mythology that Stalin supposedly loved the Russian Orthodox Church. Stalin helped religion, revived the religion, which is pure nonsense. Okay, what they do, they pick up certain things Stalin did during the Second World War. Okay, and they amplify this, they exaggerate it, trying to present Stalin almost like a friend of religion, which is nonsense, because Stalin was a Bolshevik ideologist who promoted Marxism-Leninism, okay? And before 1943, Stalin was the enemy of religion. I will remind you some statistics, okay? Because it's important for some Westerners to know, and for some Russian-speaking people. Um, in 1920s, 1930s, there were officially, I repeat, officially, 500,000 people in the Soviet Union who were locked in prison for their religious activities. These were priests, activists, deacons, rabbis, Buddhist preachers, patriarchs, bishops, all kinds of religious people, 500,000 people. Out of these people, 100,000 officially were killed, executed. Okay, it's the most active people who promoted Buddhism, Judaism, Russian Orthodoxy. That's how Bolsheviks treated the religion. Okay, they destroyed thousands of churches. Okay, but what happened in 1943, the year Maria just mentioned? It's a very important year. That's the year when Stalin formally disbanded so-called Comintern, Communist International, this organization that wanted to spread socialism all over the world, or global revolution. Okay, he did it to pacify FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Winston Churchill. It was a formal decision. In the same year, I repeat, in the same year, 1943, Maria mentioned it, and I want to stress it. He brings back from Gulag, from Siberian prisons, those Russian priests, Russian Orthodox priests who were there. Okay, he brings them to Moscow and he said, I need you. I need you to help me to fight this great patriotic war against the German invaders. Why did he do it? Because Stalin was a pragmatic politician. He realized that he could not mobilize people by appealing to slogans of communism, socialism. Who is going, Marie, to die for socialism, for Karl Marx, for Lenin? Nobody's going to die. But when you appeal to old icons, old religious symbols, that's what people are going to die for, okay? For their religion. So he realized he needed something. Plus, there was a very important thing that was going on in the occupied area of the Soviet Union. National Socialists who invaded eastern part, western part of the Soviet Union, they allowed Russian Orthodox Church to open the churches, chapels, okay? And secret police and NKVD started to report to Stalin that, look, a dangerous thing is going on. A lot of priests, a lot of parishioners, regular people who come to church, they sympathize with Nazis because Nazis, they opened the churches, okay? Don't get me wrong, Maria. Nazis were not friends of Christianity. Nazis were the enemies of Christianity. In fact, in his Table Talks, it's a book of Hitler's speeches, he said, we hate Christianity, but we're not going to shut down the churches because scientific worldview will eradicate Christianity in the process of education. So he was a materialist, so to speak. They didn't want to shut down the churches, Nazi. Unlike Stalin, who shut down the churches, put the priests in Gulag, executed them, turned the churches in storage areas, or completely erased them, okay? So there was a very dangerous situation when Nazis were opening the churches, and Stalin realized that he needed to do something in this situation. So he brings these people from Gulag, remaining priests who were sitting in Gulag, and tells them, I'm going to legalize you. I'm going to open some churches, not all of them, you know, some of them. I will allow you to publish your newspaper, okay, Orthodox newspaper. But you will have to pledge that you are going to help me. And that's what they did. They were forced to pledge. So again, this old tradition of church serving the state was revived in a new guise, okay? So legally, Russian Orthodox Church since 1943 was allowed to exist, okay? But there was a caveat here. Caveat, I mean, there was a condition here. The condition was that they had to cooperate with the secret police. They, Russian Orthodox priests were forced to report to the secret police. So it became a rule in the Soviet Union when basically each priest on a regular basis had to report to local KGB officers. So they had their case officers to whom they reported what parishioners had to say. That is why when some old or young people came to church for confession, for communion confession in 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and if they said something subversive, a priest had to report this confession. So I'm telling Western people, because according to Western a view of the church life. So priests are not supposed to reveal confession of the people. It's a secret. It's a mystery. It's something that exists between a priest and parishioner when a person comes for a confession. But in the Soviet Union, a priest was obligated to report to his KGB case officer about something subversive his parishioner had to say. So it's a very strange situation, which already defies our regular understanding of religion, how religion should function. That's one thing. The second thing, all church elite, which right now occupies a dominant position in Moscow Patriarchate, and they try to control this Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. This elite, aged people, old people, they were raised in late Soviet Union. So almost all of them considered normal to be not only friends with KGB, but to work for KGB. For example, present day Patriarch of Moscow, Kirill, everybody knows about this person, okay? We can show his portrait, okay? Who is the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. In Soviet times, when he was 20-year-old young man, okay? He goes to Switzerland. He was sent by the church to Switzerland to be in charge of Russian Orthodox churches in Western Europe. Can you imagine? A young guy in the Soviet Union, or 20-year-old. I don't know, Maria, maybe you don't know, but any person of my age who listens to this story, he knows exactly who Kirill was, because there was a rule in the Soviet Union before a regular person was allowed to go to so-called capitalist country, such as Switzerland. He or she had to go to a socialist country to be tested, to be tried, to see how he or she behaved before he or she was allowed to go to a capitalist country. Even some trusted people, even some Komsomol and party workers were not allowed simply to go to a capitalist country for the first time. But in this case, we have a person who was appointed in Russian Orthodox Church to represent Russian Orthodox Church in the West, to be in charge of this Western European parishes, okay, because they existed who cooperated with Moscow Patriarchate, okay, and you guys, girls, you can make your own conclusions who this guy is, because in the Soviet Union, basically nobody was allowed to visit a capitalist country without permission of KGB, so that's how it was,
Exactly.
and this
No
person
one.
yeah.
No one. And I made
Mhm.
a special program. If somebody is interested, it is called Grand Guignol, about this person, about all of his jumps and swings. And maybe it's interesting mostly for Russian speaking audience, but still you can have it with subtitles.
And Marie, you know what? I want to, don't get me wrong, it's these people like Kirill, the head of the Russian Church of Moscow Patriarchate. So, and people like himself, the elite, Russian Orthodox elite, or medium level church bureaucrats, they do not consider this cooperation with secret police as something they have to hide, they almost openly do it, it's normal for them because they view it as continuation of this tradition working for the state. You know what I mean? Because their ancestors worked for the state, who represented the czarist church bureaucrats in Holy Synod, and now they do the same thing. The problem with this so-called rank and file priests who are in local parishioners, young priests, who have problems with this, who were raised in 1990s, because they could catch this freedom, the decade of freedom in 1990s, when KGB was criticized, when cooperation between church and the state was frowned upon, and these new generation of people, they have problems with this. So right now, the church elite, they try to put down these young priests who occasionally ask uncomfortable questions. Or, lo and behold, there were few Russian Orthodox priests inside of Russia who spoke against the war, Ukrainian war. And that they were penalized, severely penalized, not only kicked out from the church and forbidden to preach, but some of them were persecuted. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing, this Kirill and Russian Orthodox Church or Moscow Patriarchate, it actually blessed the Russian invasion into Ukraine. They blessed it. So how do you expect Ukrainian parliament to act in this case if Russian Orthodox Church blessed the invasion? Okay, and Russian Orthodox Church inside of Ukraine that still was affiliated with Moscow Patriarchate, they were reluctant at first after 2014. After 2014, the first attempt of invasion, indirect invasion, they were reluctant to condemn Moscow. Okay, and that's how this division started between uh, Ukrainian independent Orthodox Church and Russian Orthodox Church or Moscow Patriarchy. That's how this division was growing, and eventually in 2019, it was a split, it was a schism, complete schism. So they became separated. But even after the invasion, the second invasion, the major, massive invasion, 2022, this Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine of Moscow Patriarchy, they changed the name, which confused people a lot. They changed the name, okay? They decided not to call themselves Russian Orthodox Church. They started to call themselves uh, Ukrainian Orthodox Church, okay, of Moscow Patriarchate. Okay. At the same time, we have independent Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which planted confusion in the minds of the regular people, because when sociologists went to people, started asking regular Ukrainians before this or after, right after the invasion, some people were confused about it. Okay, so that is why, that's how this law happened, which was adopted, because Ukrainians, I suppose you know better than me, had to decide once and for all, ask the question of these guys and girls who still try to loosely affiliate themselves with Moscow. Which side are you on? Because, for goodness sake, we have a war, whether we like it or not. You cannot stay neutral. You have to choose sides in this case, unless you go somewhere to Australia or South Africa and completely avoid this conflict. But if you are in Russia and Ukraine, you have to take sides. Uh, so there's no no middle option, right?
I think that there is something we lack at the moment, and this is the question which has to be posed: why is not the Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate considered to be a terroristic organization? I think that this step um, would be of great help to people to realize what is meant. Now we're not talking about a religious organization. It is a KGB, FSB, or GRU organization under cover of Russian Orthodox Church, Moscowite Patriarchate. And I think that we have to begin a discussion what exactly should be done to recognize them as terrorists. I know that not only Ukraine is suffering because of their existence, but many Western countries and also in United States, we have plenty of strange things happen. Not only when priests, so to say, or spies in cassocks and robes are doing some shocking crimes, but also the fact that they are appealing to wide audiences, that they're trying to spread that myth about the freedom of religion and all that stuff, and that very, very many people believe in this manipulation.
Yeah, about talking about the freedom of religion. I'm glad that you raised this issue. Look, talking about the freedom of religion, in the 1990s, briefly in Russia, there was really freedom of religion. In fact, there was a bunch of missionaries from different countries, and they competed freely in Russia. But right now, situation is totally different. For example,
Many
yeah.
confessed, many
Hmm.
confessed and said how wrong they were by practically serving the KGB and the Soviet regime. They were trying to find the true religion, the true Christianity. There was a period, you are absolutely right, when many priests were trying to wash away all these embarrassing moments of their lives.
Yeah, but you know when situation started to change within Russia, when the freedom of religion was destroyed since 2009, when Kirill came to power and decided to change, to make the drastic changes, okay? That's when they started to kick out foreign missionaries. They cracked down on the Catholic Church. And basically right now in Russia, we have only 4 religious denominations that are allowed to exist. That's the Russian Orthodox Church, Islam, Buddhism, and Judaism. The rest of the denominations, they are not approved. Some of them illegal, some of them semi-illegal. Like, for example, Catholic Church. Catholic Church is frequently persecuted in present-day Russia. They are not allowed the same power as the Russian Orthodox Church or Buddhism. Take such minor movement as Jehovah's Witnesses. By the way, Jehovah's Witnesses, a good litmus test how you treat Jehovah's Witnesses. Basically, innocent guys and girls who exist as an independent denomination, they don't recognize the state. Yeah, I know that's the problem. In the United States, for instance, they act freely, you know, and they don't bother me. Occasionally, they give me these flyers. So what? Okay, this summer I was in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. In Latvia, for instance, I saw Jehovah's Witnesses openly standing on the corner and doing their silly talks. You know, for instance, I don't care. You know, so what? If I don't care, it doesn't mean that we should forbid them. You know, but in present-day Russia, to be a member of Jehovah's Witnesses movement, it's a guarantee that you will be arrested and put in prison. So that's see, I'm just giving you a specific example that tells a lot. So that is why in the present-day Russia, to talk about the freedom of religion, I wouldn't say this, you know.
So
So
there
that
is no freedom of religion there at
yeah.
all. There is this massive influence of this Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate, which is actually just it's not a subordination of KGB or FSB. It is a part of it now. They are already one big system. The point is, how do they develop themselves abroad? How they spread and how they build these churches in the middle of Paris, in the center of Paris, how they move in the United States, how they look for different loyal organizations that are proclaiming for their rights. And this is something we have to discuss.
I will tell you that's one thing which people don't know, don't remember. Another year, it's the year 2007. What happened in 2007? Okay. It's a very important year. It was a big project of Putin's regime, I suppose, secret police that control the church. In 2007, we have the unification of the Russian Orthodox Church abroad and the Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. It's very important. So it's a big victory. It was a big victory for Putin's regime. That's how Maria, they started to pump the money to fund the loyal parishes, loyal churches, loyal priests. They started to cultivate it because by 2007, they were able to convince these naive Western Orthodox people from Canada, US, Switzerland, France, you know, or Russia became a democratic country with market economy. So we have freedom of religion. So let's go back home, Russian Orthodox Church abroad. So you separated yourself. When the separation happened, you know, separation happened after 1917 when Bolsheviks came to power. Okay, that's what divided Russian Orthodox Church at that time. And the Patriarch Tikhon was convinced by Bolsheviks to approve the Soviet regime, and that's what planted the seed of doubt in the Western Russian Orthodox Church, who said we disagree with Bolsheviks, and they separated themselves. And this separation lasted until 2007. Okay,
it was a kind of exile, I would even say.
Exile, yeah.
It was a kind of exile for those who really tried to preserve the Russian Orthodox Church abroad, Christianity, and so on. And they looked up to this happening Bolsheviks revolution. They had to flee, and it was for them a chance to separate once in the history from the state, because in 1917 the major part was persecuted, as you already said, but those who went abroad decided that they finally will serve to people, well, to Christianity. And this is the point where we have to, what we have also to discuss. It's very important what you mentioned in 2007. It is a great tragedy that these naive Orthodox people abroad that call themselves Russian Orthodox Church of Western, of abroad, of exile, I
Mhm.
don't know the exact, and they had their separate life, a quiet life in central cities of Europe, in United States, everywhere, and they were doing their job, and I think they were recognized, and everything was fine. But then they really made this tragedy, this mistake, this horrible mistake, when they decided to come together with this dirty story of KGB and FSB, practically security services of Soviet Union, of Russia
Yeah,
now. And
because Maria, in present situation, because this unification of Russian Orthodox Church abroad and the Russian Orthodox Church or Moscow Patriarchate created the legal channels for Muscovites to send the agents
that's
because
it.
they can do it freely in the
That's
religious guise. That's the problem.
the spies and Cassocks, spies in robes. And I would like maybe to discuss also what is the way they're acting in United States. Are people in United States naive about all of it?
The naivety of U.S. people is explained by the fact they judge by American standards. They judge other countries by American standards. For instance, in the United States, church fellowships or church communities, they're totally independent. Many of them elect their own leaders. Can you imagine? They elect their own priests in the United States. It's a very unusual situation. And they think about other countries. Even in Europe, we don't have this. Like, for instance, in Europe, there are some Lutheran churches in some European countries, they receive salaries from the state. So we don't have it in the United States. And many naive Americans in the US and in Canada too, they think about other countries that they have the same situation, which is not the case. Okay. They don't understand the simple fact, I repeat it for the third time, that a Russian Orthodox Church in present Russian state is totally subordinated to the state control. Okay. When you tell them this, oh, how come we didn't know about this? So that is why I'm repeating the same thing again, again, and again, because we need to know that we are not talking about religion in case of Russian Orthodox Church or Moscow Patriarchate. We are talking about the semi-state ideology that is affiliated with the interest of the state. Okay, for example, it's another unusual example. You know about this attempts of Moscow to spread the soft influence in Africa. Okay, and of course, as a follow-up, as a continuation of this policy, we have Russian Orthodox Church expanding to Africa, believe it or not. Okay, in many African countries, the Russian Orthodox Church sent its delegates. Okay, where they set up. Okay, I have the number. Where they set up 20 church buildings. They recruited local African people, intelligentsia, African intelligentsia, who were religiously oriented, and said, "Oh, we're going to pay you about $200 a month. We will train you as a Russian Orthodox priest. Please work for us." And they did find dozens of people, Africans, black Africans, who now they are doing this. It's like we're talking about this private military company, Wagner, that spread its influence, successors of Wagner. And now we have this ideological follow-up or ideological continuation. This Russian Orthodox Church also goes to Africa, sets up 20 churches, hires local African priests who spread this influence. And of course, it's not only religious influence, it's a political influence simultaneously, because they have to report to Moscow. So it's a nice place to have the base, spiritual base, okay, from where you can affect people's minds.
Yes, and you are going very deep inside families because you have all these baptizings, funerals, and so on.
Yes,
And you are
absolutely.
going very deep inside. And I think that we have to do our best that the Western world understands what exactly was done in Estonia, in Ukraine, why we consider this organization as a threat, as a basically paramilitary organization undercover. This is something they do, and when they have interests, especially, they invade with agents endlessly. All of them, they are trained basically
And it's not,
to.
Maria, it's natural for them. It's natural for them because the present day mindset of the Russian elite is infested with these ideas. It's a mixture of what? Stalinism, Russian Orthodoxy, conspiracy theories, occult ideas, New Age ideas. They believe that Russia is under the siege of this Western, damn Westerners, Catholic Church, Jews, Freemasons, and it's a cocktail, ideological cocktail. That's what drives the mindset of these people. It's natural for them because they think that Russia is like a fortress, you know. That is why it's natural. I repeat this word. It's natural for them to plan these agents, you know, because they believe that they have to build this fortress, spiritual fortress, you know. In fact, Kirill, in his speech, in one of his recent speeches, he literally said that we are the spiritual fortress, you know, we have to protect ourselves. It's like a mentality of besieged fortress, you know, the whole world is against us. It's a sense of insecurity, you know, because they don't want to reconcile themselves to the simple idea that Russia is not anymore the Soviet Union as we had, you know. It's unfortunately a nation that reports to China right now on many occasions. They have to, and that's what they don't want to admit, you know. And they created this, I repeat, ideological cocktail called Eurasianism, this kind of ideology, you know. And that's what they try to sell to other countries. They try to befriend Hamas. They try to befriend this other Islamic organizations. Why? Because they feel that they're very close to them. I'm going back to the main point I made in the beginning of our interview, that look, the whole problem comes from a simple fact that a state and church are not separated. They're together in Moscow. The same thing we see in Hamas, in this Islamic countries like Iran, this revolutionary guards, you know, that's the state and church, they exist like the same family. Okay, all these people who work for the church, they simultaneously work for the security police, for the state. It's a normal behavior for them, you know. That shouldn't surprise us, you know. It's a totally different politics, totally different political culture, you know, because they don't understand how in the West churches can be independent. Okay, they don't believe it. If you tell present day like secret police officers that look, in the United States and Canada, a lot of churches, they're very independent. They don't want to be dependent on the state. They said, oh, you're lying. It's not true. Because they judge Western countries by their own standards, okay? Like naive Americans judge Russia, Iran, or China by their own standards. It's a big mistake, you know. You have to understand how such regimes like Putin regime, they function, where everything subordinated to Muscovite center. Remember this famous expression, a vertical of power. That's it. That explains everything. I think the major takeaway for our listeners should be this, you know, church, any religious fellowship, denomination, they do not exist in a vacuum. They, especially in a time of war, they have to take sides, okay? And the church frequently serves the national interests of a state, especially in such countries which are dictatorships, like Iran, like Russia, even China, where Chinese government hates Falun Gong, this independent dissident movement, because they are not subordinated to the state. See, that's very simple. So the same in Moscow. The Muscovite regime doesn't like dissident activities. They want all religious life to be subordinated to the state, to serve for everything for the state, to serve the state, to promote interest of the state. That's how it is. Unfortunately, in totalitarian states, you know, that's the major lesson I think our listeners should learn from this talk between me and Maria. Thank you, Maria, for this
Thank you very
conversation.
much. Thank you very
Mhm.
much. And we'll see the feedback, the comments, and we will think how we can do the next program. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. See you soon. Bye bye.
See you soon. Bye bye.